Good morning. Welcome to our Committee of the Whole agenda for Tuesday, October 1st, 2019. I'd like to call this meeting to order at this time and ask if there's any declarations of interest. Seeing none, I'm going to move on to item D. I'm going to leave C until after our presentation. And I'm going to move on to D. And I'm wondering, Mr. Clerk, if you could introduce our presentation.
Certainly. Thank you, Madam Mayor. It is an honor to present to you Honourable Caroline Mulroney, MPP, Minister of Transportation of Ontario, making a presentation to committee regarding the provincial funding announcement.
Welcome. Good to have you in our chambers. I think this is the first time.
It is. I'm so pleased to be here. Good morning, Your Worship, members of Council, residents, and Town of East Gwillimbury staff. I am very pleased to be with you here this morning to announce that the Ontario government is investing over $2.2 million in infrastructure funding for the Mount Albert Centre Street Revitalization Project. So whether you're going to work or school or shopping, you will be able to rely on safe roads and bridges, which is essential. Centre Street is critical for students and families, businesses, seniors on National Seniors Day. It is the route home from school, the road to the downtown core, and the important connection from the Royal Oak to the downtown Mount Albert area. This is a crucial investment that will give our community members reliable and safe infrastructure. I'd like you all to know that I am committed to working with the town of East Gwillimbury in order to deliver secure and sustainable infrastructure in our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This funding is certainly going to support the town in our efforts to continue to improve our infrastructure throughout our community. On behalf of all of our residents and our council here, we thank you very much. We're going to do a picture. I'm just going to come down first.
Excellent.
Well, that's the way to start the day, isn't it? Yes, and start the month. What a great announcement. That's going to make a tremendous difference for our community, and we're so very grateful for having federal money, provincial money. Thank you. And with that, we will go to community announcements now, and I will start with Councillor Cohn.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's been a busy few weeks. Had the pleasure of attending the 150th anniversary of St. James Church just the other night. That was quite a service that we had. And on Saturday, we're at the 60th anniversary of the East Gwillimbury Minor Hockey Association. We have a lot of these long anniversaries, which is great. It speaks to the legacy of what we have going on here. And of course, the candlelight vigil for the fallen police officers last week at the corner of Harold Road and Highway 48, not too far from my place. And we had the fire prevention open house, and we were lucky enough to open a new business in town with Longos. So it was nice to see that economic activity happening in EG. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Crothers?
Thank you very much. Rather than repeating what Councillor Crone has already talked about, I want to make an announcement about our Holland Landing Community Group, which is one of our new groups that Councillor Foster and I are the council liaisons on. This community group has been growing, and they're up to a lot of great work. Coming up in December, they're going to be hosting a Festival of Lights, which will be a competition in Holland Landing, who has the best lights. And they're working on getting prizes from our local businesses. And then they have 2 more events planned in the spring and the summer, which I can tell you about at a future meeting. So keep your eye out for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Roy DeClemente.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The East Gwillimbury Public Library is looking forward to Public Libraries Week, and all hands are on deck for their giant used book sale, which is October 25th and 26th. All proceeds go to our library, and there's also a really awesome silent auction that's shaping up really nicely. The other thing is I'd like to let committee know and council know that the Sharon Temple has been awarded the National Trust's Ecclesiastical Insurance Cornerstone Award. And that is, sorry, I did have to read that. It's in celebration of exemplary projects, places, and people that contribute to the quality of life and service of place, and a sense of place, and illustrate the viability of our heritage buildings and sites for traditional or even new uses. So they've had a nice little award in recognition of their position in our community. So I just thought I'd let you folks know that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Morton.
I don't have to repeat everything that Scott's already said and everyone else has said because we were all in the same place all weekend.
Councillor Foster.
I can echo that to go along with all that's been said so far. The only thing that I did want to mention was I believe tonight at the Ross Family Complex is another meeting with South Lake for their plans for the future, with healthcare being at the top of everyone's mind. That one might be worthwhile attending. I did attend the one in Sharon along with Councillor Crone. That was a couple months ago, I believe. There was lots of good information come out of there. I don't believe tonight is the same meeting. I think it's something different.
I believe that they're moving forward on making some plans. So again, wanting to have some input from our community. We also have the Farm to Fork coming up on October the 5th, and the Mount Albert Lions Oktoberfest. October 8th is the town is hosting a community open house, and everyone is invited to come from 5 to 7. And on October the 9th, Portraits of Giving reception in recognition of Resident Anita Donato. And that is here in our atrium, so everybody is welcome as well. And just a couple that were not mentioned. I was at the Sharon Temple on Saturday evening, the YMCA Represent Your Region Talent Contest. I was not a judge. I was just there to enjoy, and I wanted to let everyone know that the winner of the evening was a young man from Queensville who's a dancer, and he is going to the finals on this weekend. So we'll keep our fingers crossed for him there. And I also wanted to give a shout out to Firehouse Subs. We were all at the emergency services event at the Fire Hall in Queensville this past week, and Firehouse Subs provided a $5,000 donation to emergency services, and the funding will be used for programming, and that's a substantial amount of money. We're really lucky to have them as a business in our community, but also supportive so much of our community as well. And finally, I wanted to give a shout out to Eric Kopsala, who was the organizer of the minor hockey, East Gwillimbury minor hockey 60th anniversary. I know he had a team behind him, but he certainly was a leader, and I believe he met with myself and staff the better part of a year ago, and it certainly showed. The only thing that we had difficulty with was the weather. However, it didn't dampen anybody's spirits, and it was a wonderful event to celebrate 60 years of hockey in East Gwillimbury. With that, I will move on to, I'm not sure that I've asked anybody if they have a declaration of interest. I did. That's good. And Mr. Clerk, we're down to deputies.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You did not have any listed deputations on the agenda when published. However, you did have 3 deputation requests submitted Friday by the deadline. All 3 with regards to item K3, Development Services Planning Branch Report, 2019-44, updates on Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, LPAT, appeal on Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw number 2018-043. As per Council's Procedural Bylaw 2009-109, Section 13.2, I'd like to advise Council that except where there is a statutory right to be heard, Council is the governing body, and all deputants are heard only upon the consent of Council. As there have been numerous deputations and input received previously related to this subject, it may be helpful to Council to ensure that deputants focus on any new information or perspective to assist Council with their deliberations. Further, for Council, staff, and resident clarity, it is important that comments or requests are clearly articulated on the form submitted. Lastly, given that the report highlights a number of resident questions and issues related to other jurisdictions, in many cases, those may be best pursued directly with those jurisdictions, excuse me. And that is, so we have the 3 requests are the first one submitted was by J. Gamble, and 2 of them submitted by P. Varvaro. I should note that the 2 submitted by Ms. Varvaro, the summary are identical on both requests. That is it, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. Those are very good points for us. Once again, I remind you, we are here to listen to feedback. And before we invite our first deputant up, a reminder that you have 5 minutes to share with any new information on the topic, and also note that you are welcome to submit any additional written comments for Council's information and consideration at a later time. Thank you. You could introduce our deputants, please.
Madam Mayor, your first deputant is Jay Gamble, making a deputation again with regards to item K3.
Welcome. Good to have you with us today.
Madam Mayor, councillors. It's actually unusual to be standing here and not whining and complaining about something. I feel almost naked. Anyway, this is a kudos. Thank you. It appears that you're going to push through the bylaw pertaining to the 1997 EP zonings, no 1,000 acres, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. One can only hope that the assumptions made by town staff that, in fact, we are in compliance and that the Conservation Authority will withdraw their appeal, although they have stated quite publicly they will not do so. So I don't think we have much chance there. I feel we're headed for LPAT, and it'll be up to LPAT to make the final decision regardless of what any of us have to say. So all I have to say is thank you. Short and sweet.
Thank you very much.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the next deputant is P. Varvaro, but I do not see her in attendance.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we'll move along in our agenda. Could I have a motion to receive the deputy? Councillor Crone. All those in favor? And that's carried. We'll move to item F, and that is corporate services with Councillor Morton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have nothing on the agenda today. Mr. Valchich, do you have anything that you want brought forward to council?
Nothing further. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Do any members of committee have any questions for Mr. Valchich? Hearing none or seeing none, Madam Mayor, I turn the chair back to you.
Thank you very much. We are at item G, and that's Community Infrastructure and Environmental Services with Councillor Crothers in the chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. We have 4 items before us today. They're all pretty straightforward. I'll turn it over to General Manager Molinari.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first item was a memorandum with regards to the Ministry of the Environment. It's a good news story. I just wanted to highlight for Council that for the 3rd year in a row, we received 100% compliance on our inspection.
Are there any questions from committee? Seeing none, can I have someone move the resolution that this report be received? Councillor Morton, all in favor? That's carried. Number 2 is about Judea Doan Way construction update. Mr. Molinari, you want to take us through that one?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This again is another good news story. Judea Doan Way is a very important linkage for the town. I've been waiting for this for some time. The underground services have all been completed, and the contractor is currently working on getting the road installed. One of the setbacks we found out about after preparing this memo is that the road base for this that supports the new road is actually very saturated currently, and will need a couple of months to dry before paving can be installed. So unfortunately, the paving will be deferred until 2020. But in the interim, the sidewalk will be installed, which will provide a very important linkage for pedestrians from the community out to Leslie Street. So although that's unfortunate, we look forward to seeing this road being completed in 2020.
Thank you very much. Any questions from committee members? Councillor Roy DeClemente.
Please not that job. Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, to staff, is there a way for us to sort of get that information out to the residents? This has been, and especially for the folks who are nearby, the only way of getting out to Leslie Street at this point is either is down at David Wilson or even as far as Manorhampton. There isn't really a good east-west connection. So they've been anticipating this quite hotly, and so if there's a way for us to communicate that, I think it would be appreciated. Not just, the pedestrian connection is helpful, and that is a good compromise. But just making sure that we through our usual channels that we let folks know, especially since they don't get a newspaper. So we've got to work a little extra harder to get information to those folks. Thank you.
Excellent. I'm seeing lots of nods from staff on that one. Is there any other questions? Seeing none, can I have someone move receipt of this item? Councillor Roy DeClemente, all in favor? And that's carried. The next one is our traffic camera pilot project. I'll turn that over to you, Mr. Molinari.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This particular memo is somewhat bittersweet in that town staff we really had what we thought was a really nice pilot that would have assisted to reduce speeds in a number of locations, and we had done some pretty good groundwork with the traffic camera supplier in order to make that happen. Unfortunately, we are the victims of timing issue with the region. And when I mentioned bittersweet, the region's actually looking at piloting their own project, which may include a pilot in East Gwillimbury for some work to put in automated speed enforcement in community safety zones in schools. So the region's pilot is a good news story for York Region and some of the larger area municipalities as well, in that there will be additional measures put in place to control speeding. It's just not the same pilot that we had envisioned. But once the region's pilot is somewhat settled, we'll see what we can do to bring our proposed pilot back and maybe be able to expand the Road Watch program ability to get some radar support for the Road Watch program and be able to use this in areas that suit the town's needs.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions from committee? Mayor Haxon.
Thank you very much. It's unfortunate. I know all of us here were looking at that as being an opportunity to speak to many concerns from our residents. I'm wondering, with this on hold now, is there an opportunity to take a look at some other things that are happening? I'm thinking not only around the region, but around the province, that communities have tapped into some innovative ideas about speed on their local roads.
Mr. Molinari.
Through you, Madam Chair, absolutely. We're always looking for new effective ways of being able to control speeding, and speeding is one of those issues in town that it affects everybody. So we will look at some of those and speak to some of our other partners in this area, and when we find good opportunities, we'll certainly bring them forward for council's consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Morton.
Thank you. I had actually, it was fortunate when I was on council before, and along with Linda Paps and Nelson Costa from the region, we actually formed the York Region Road Watch Committee. And I believe that Mayor Haxon was the only one at that time, and Mr. Webster, that attended the very first and only Road Watch convention that we held a few years ago. And over the years, it has gotten a little smaller and smaller and smaller, but it's an amazing program. And I'm fortunate that I have been able to find a couple of people already, and some other ones are interested in joining the East Gwillimbury Road Watch Committee. So we're looking forward to that. It's just a matter of education and getting it out to our residents and how they can report the speeding, and I'm looking forward to that happening in the near future. So,
thank you for that. Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Mr. Molinari, thank you for your report, and I appreciate your comment that it was a bittersweet report. I know we were in discussions along with my colleague, Councillor Morton, to see if we could work on reducing some speeding, and especially in Ward 3. There's a number of areas that we're very concerned about, and we had been working on that. So while I am disappointed that we won't be able to get going as soon as we'd hoped, let's mark our calendars and for next year and make sure that we get in there early and keep pushing for expanding the pilot and doing our own when the time comes. So thank you very much for your report and all the hard work you're doing to reduce speeding in our town. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Foster.
Mr. Molinari, was there any indication through the York Region pilot project that any number of locations within East Gwillimbury where we may benefit from their program?
Mr. Molinari.
Through Madam Chair, their report's actually going to Regional Council very shortly. So we don't. Once it's approved, there's still some legislative items that need to happen before that pilot can get underway. But we expect that if all goes well, it will be underway shortly. They'll have to acquire the cameras and etc. And from what I understand, the original proposal was for York Region to have one mobile camera that they will be able to move around to different community safety zones. So it's not a lot of equipment, but it is enough to kind of. And it is mobile, so it can be moved around to different locations, and they'd be targeting schools that were on regional roads within the region. So, obviously the town, there are some locations in town that meet that criteria, and we look forward to potentially seeing some here and in other communities.
Thank you very much. If there's no further questions, can I have someone move receipt? Councillor Crone, all in favor? And that's carried. And lastly, we have an update, excuse me, on our transportation water wastewater master plan. Mr. Molinari.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is really just an update memo to advise council of two upcoming events. The first one would be our council education session next week, where we will be going over both master plans in some detail. We'll have the consultants here to provide a presentation and kind of go through their findings to date. And also to advise that the master plans will also be going to the community open house later on that evening. So Tuesday next week is going to be fairly busy for master plans.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from members of the committee? Seeing none, can I have someone move receipt? Councillor Roy DiClemente, all in favor? That's carried. Is there any questions or comments under CIES from members of the committee? Seeing none, Mr. Molinari, do you have anything to add?
Nothing further, thank you.
Thank you. Then I'll turn the chair back to you, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Crothers. We are now at item H, Emergency and Community Safety Services, with Councillor Roy DiClemente in the chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have one item on our prepared agenda. It's a memorandum regarding a pilot project called Toys for Tickets. Mr. Dawson, anything further to add?
This is basically a good news story with a little of opportunity for some goodwill, public relations, and some education. Happy to answer questions. And of course, Manager Jennifer Nichols is here to entertain those, should you wish.
Members of committee, any questions? May I have a motion to receive the memorandum? Moved by Councillor Foster. All those in favor? And that motion is carried. Any opposed? Thank you. Motion is carried. Mr. Dawson, do you have anything further to add at this time?
Yes, with the pleasure of the chair, about three things to add. I know there is some inquiries about the current open cannabis files. An update with further to come in future is that multi-department, namely Development Services, Emergency Community Safety Services, and Legal are working with the clients on those open files, and we hope to have some more information in future. Number two, as mentioned during the community announcements this morning, thank you very much regarding the open house. I would be remiss if I didn't note for public session that Fire Prevention Officer Davidson and Public Educator Specialist Nicole have done a great job year over year in attendance from this council and staff, much appreciated. We're also several fire chiefs from the region. And the community attendance, they've seemed to hit a good recipe as it grows every year along with our partner agencies. So thank you to Shauna and Nicole, among many others, but they certainly spearhead this. Third and final, funding Firehouse Subs has been fantastic. I know you were there for the presentations, many of you. To date, we are over $50,000 in grants we have received from Firehouse, so it's a very great partnership. Again, thanks to Shauna and Nicole for working that. As well, there will be some more information coming up for a presentation to council in late October, early November, is Project Assist, working with Public Fire Marshal's Fire Safety Council, as well as Enbridge. We are a multi-year recipient of this Project Assist award as well, and compliments to staff on job well done. If you have any questions, happy to answer. Thank you.
That's a big update. Thank you, Mr. Dawson. Any questions? Just as far as the open cannabis files, I think it may be appropriate if we had an update in closed session. I don't think there's one scheduled for today, but I'm just wondering, Mr. Webster or Mr. Clerk, if we can have something scheduled for our next meeting in October so we can have a more fulsome update on the status. I know quite a few residents have asked what was happening with those, so it'd be helpful to have that information at hand. Thank you. May I have a motion to receive I think that was technically 4 updates regarding the cannabis files, the community safety open house, which was an amazing evening, and I think we hit record numbers of attendance, the Firehouse Subs grant, and the Project Assist award. Moved by Mayor Haxon. All those in favor? And that motion is carried. Thank you. Do members of committee, anything you'd like to raise under this area? Seeing none, I'll turn the chair back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We're under item I, administration, with myself in the chair. At this time, there are no items on the agenda. Mr. Webster, is there anything that should be brought up at this time?
Not at this time, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Any members of committee with any items under this topic? Seeing none, we will move along then to item J, and that is Legal and Counsel Support Services with Councillor Foster.
Well, thanks, Madam Mayor. We have nothing prepared on the agenda at this time. Mr. Proudfoot, anything further?
Nothing further to add at this time.
With that, I'll turn it back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We're under item K, Development Services, with Councillor Crone in the chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have Three items on the agenda today. First one is the Joint Development Services and Community Infrastructure and Environmental Services memo with regards to Center Street. General Manager Rumino, do you have anything to add to this?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. So this is, as you've mentioned, a joint memo between myself and Jim Molinari. It's really to provide council with an update on the Averton site plan application and the pending development of the site. As council's aware, back in March, council approved the site plan application. Since that time, staff have been working with the applicant to prepare and finalize the implementing site plan agreement. And we need to present back to the LPAT, the implementing zoning bylaw and OP documents. But we're at a stage where the review has been completed with respect to, we have sign-offs from the Conservation Authority and other departments, and we've identified a next steps, a timeline with respect to the applicant's construction program. They've committed to holding a public consultation meeting for the community to advise them as to their timelines, and as spelled out, they'll schedule that sometime in October. And following that, they are prepared to mobilize and be on site, install their siltation control measures, and then start clearing of the site and the topsoil and earthworks into the fall and early winter, again with the goal to start their home construction early spring of 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Ramuno. Could I have a mover for this? Moved by Councillor Morton. Are there any questions? Seeing none, can I call for a vote? All those in favor? None opposed? Motion is carried. Second item on our list is the Joint Development Services and Legal Counsel Support Services report regarding Queensville Properties, Phase 5. Mr. Ramuno, could you enlighten us?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. So again, this is an update for council, and we are seeking direction with respect to this phase 5 of the community Queensville development, the plan of subdivision and implementing zoning bylaw. This matter was appealed to the LPAT back in 2017. There has been some ongoing mediation between the developer, the Ratepayers Association along Mill Court and Grand Court, and staff. A LPAT hearing has been scheduled for early December of this year. So my recommendations to council at this time is, again, staff needs direction to appear at this upcoming LPAT hearing, but that staff also, or council also directs staff to enter into a minutes of settlement on the plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw. We've just about completed our review of the applications with respect to the plan of subdivision, the lotting road pattern. Staff have no concerns. The Residents Ratepayers Association, they're party to the LPAT hearing. They had a number of issues earlier on. I and some of my staff have been in communication with them as of late Friday of this week, or last week rather. They have had a number of meetings with the developer group, and the one outstanding matter in order for them to consent to a settlement is just the issue regarding a privacy fence along their rear property line between the existing development and the proposed development.
Thank you, Mr. Ramuno. Can I have a mover for this? Somebody? Thank you, Councillor Carruthers. Are there any questions regarding this? Councillor Roy D. Clemente.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a fair number of them, actually. I guess from my perspective, given that the residents, the neighborhood association is a party to the LPAT proceedings, I would appreciate an opportunity to hear back from them to make sure that they're comfortable before we were to settle with this. Members of committee will recall, or if you weren't, I don't know at what point in the process they were here. But a previous iteration of this plan had a very different neighborhood fabric, given the changes that were made as far as the school sites. We were left with a very long run of houses very close to the lot line of the existing community. Mr. Chair, through you to Mr. Ramuno, your report notes that there would be of similar building heights, given that they're both detached where the interface takes place. My concern is that many of the houses on, I think it's Grant Court, are bungalows. Is the developer planning to put bungalows along there on those 50-foot lots? I know it's possible, but when we start looking at sort of newer construction, we've got raised basements 10 feet on the main level, 9 or 10 feet on the second floor, and then a different roof profile up against a bungalow with a 90-foot deep lot. You're looking at a very different interface. So I'm just wondering if there's plans to reserve certain lots to be bungalows so that they do match, or what the zoning would look like as far as building height is concerned.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. With respect to those lots backing onto the Grand Court, what the applicant has done from a lotting perspective is provided for 50-foot frontage lots. The proposed zoning would allow for two-story homes at a height based on the proposed zoning bylaw at 11-meter maximum height. You're correct. Obviously, the existing homes within Grand Court are a combination of some bungalows and 2 stories, an older housing stock. My discussions with the developer, they haven't, with respect to the type of housing, they haven't done their sort of housing designs yet. They're not opposed to providing towns, but it's really a question of whether there's a demand, or bungalows, where there's a demand for bungalows. But again, the proposed height, maximum height for those homes on street number 10 would allow for 2 stories at a maximum height of 11 meters.
Mr. Chair, I guess when this comes back to us at the council level, I'd like to have a bit more information as far as that is concerned. The other thing I'd like to address is the trail connections and active transportation facilities being provided as part of this application. The report from staff mentions that that they're recommended or that they would be reviewed. I'd like some certainty as far as what's being delivered here. Particularly given that there's been an additional several notes of townhouses added. So we've gone from 346 units to 354 units. And from what it looks like is we're getting a pretty wide linear park. We're getting 1.3 acres of parkland. So we're basically getting a wide path in exchange for 354 homes. And so I'd like to have an understanding of what's being delivered from the recreation side and the active transportation piece. While we may not necessarily need a park block, given its closeness to the adjacent health and active living plaza, but obviously there would be certainly some opportunity for bike lanes on the local collector roads or other trail connections, even if they're elsewhere in the subdivision. I'd like some more certainty from that as well, Mr. Chair. Maybe staff have some comments.
Mr. Ramuno, do you have any comments?
To you, Mr. Chair. So we can certainly provide for the upcoming council meetings some further updates with respect to parkland dedication and proposed trail connections. From an overall density perspective, the proposed number of units and densities in keeping with the current density provisions of the Queensville secondary plan. Staff are still finalizing those those conditions of approval that we will need to present to the LPAT. But we can certainly provide some additional information with respect to whether there's any provision of bike lanes proposed within the local road network. From a trail connection, my understanding from our park staff is our current secondary plan doesn't specifically identify any trails through this specific phase 5, but we do have a linear park that splits the two proposed schools. But again, we can certainly provide an update for committee at the next council meeting.
Mr. Chair, through you to staff, the Queensville secondary plan, was this something that was approved back in the 90s when this subdivision plan was put together?
To you, Mr. Chair, yes. So the community, Queensville Community Plan was approved back in the mid-90s, and the density provisions within that plan, which have been incorporated into the new official plan, these lands are identified as low-density residential with a density provision target of 30 units per acre, or per hectare, rather. The total number of units within this plan now, combined between the range of singles and towns, is 354 units in total, and that's under the density target that falls around 27, 28 units per hectare. So they are below the maximum density targets. They're within the range provided for in the secondary plan.
Thank you. I realize that the density is probably matching with what we would like, what we have put in through our planning documents. For me, it was more about the best practices with community planning and making sure that the amenities that we have come to expect in a new subdivision are delivered given the time frame that has changed, that has transpired. There's new things that we expect now other than just houses. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. More of just a comment rather than a question. Just wanted to echo Councillor Roy de Clemente's thoughts on the trail system. I expected to get hit with some questions about this one at the next trails meeting. I just wondered if there's a possibility that there could be a better explanation within a report like this. When you look at the pedestrian connectivity to the proposed parklands and trails on page 19, the first part there that says the applicant will develop a trail system if required tells me maybe. The second one says no proposed or existing trail system within the proposed development. That tells me maybe not. And when you look at the next one, it says a linear park which will provide a connection. That tells me yes. So it seems like that one could have been written maybe a little bit better, or just an explanation. I understand what it means, but I expect that the Trails Committee will be asking me about that one, so thank you.
Staff, do we have any answers to this multiple choice scenario? Mr. Webster.
Just recently, as a matter of fact, I was talking with General Manager Karmazin and his staff. We seem to have a pretty advanced and in place trail system in place, and have added many kilometers in the new Sharon community. And the Queensville trail system, let me assure you, will be very robust. And I think what would be best is if maybe over the next cycle of this, we bring a staff presentation forward. It's a combination of naturalized trails through very nice areas. You can see a lot of the green areas that this subdivision backs onto. On street, some very innovative on street, even wider sidewalks. If you go into the community, there's some very wide sidewalks that have been put in that are maybe 1.5 times what a normal sidewalk would be, if not double. And one thing you do have to remember here is we have the Queensville Healthy Active Living Plaza being designed right now. And it's not just a building, but it is also going to contain a central park for that whole community. And it'll be very walkable. It'll be at the very end of the linear park trail here. So I think that Mr. Mazada's group could bring back a little overview of that, maybe not just for this community, but maybe for the other communities as well. Because I think the Holland Landing Community Trail System, the Mount Albert Trail System are all things that we could use a little refresher on. So maybe if we could, we'll do that as a general direction. It might help ask the 5 or 6 questions that Councillor Foster was seeming to, that we're sort of pointing in a little different directions. Maybe we'll give some clarity to that.
Thank you. Any other questions regarding this? Okay, could I have a vote then giving, Councillor Roy de Clemente.
As far as a vote is concerned, I'm just wondering, I can't remember who made the motion, but I'm just wondering if we might be able to, Councillor Carruthers, if with your permission, I'd like to suggest that we add a clause in here directing staff to bring us back further information regarding the building height and zoning, engagement with the neighborhood association, as well as trails, active transportation, and community amenities. So that were some of the questions that we had. And without slowing this down, but when it comes back to us at council, I think it would be helpful if we provided some direction about things that we'd like answered before we fully ratify this and go to the and go back to the LPAT.
You consent,
I'm fine with
Councillor?
that.
Yep, okay,
Thank
very
you.
good. Did we capture that, Mr. Clerk? Very good. All right, if I could have a vote, all in favor? None opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. And then moving on to the last item we have, it's number 3, is Development Services Planning Branch Report, updates on local planning appeal tribunal of the comprehensive zoning bylaw. Mr. Ramuno, please share.
Through you, Mr. Mr. Chair. So this is really an update for council based on the comments we received at our community open house that was held back on September 11th. Council's seen this matter a number of times before, and in fact, work on the update to the zoning bylaw began back in 2015. Since that time, we've had a number of approximately 13 community meetings, open houses, and community of whole and council meetings. So a very extensive public consultation process on the zoning bylaw. And back in May of 2018, council passed the resolution to maintain the EP protection zone in accordance with the 97 bylaw. The report today isn't recommending any changes to the current bylaw. The only recommendation before council today is to formally request the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority to withdraw their appeal before the LPAT on the zoning bylaw.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ramuno. Could I have a mover for this? Councillor Morton? Okay. Are there any questions? Councillor Carruthers?
Thank you. I just wanted to, first of all, applaud staff for holding that open house and being there to answer all the questions. Those maps were very much appreciated by many residents that I spoke with. Being able to have their questions answered on a one-on-one, a lot of people really appreciate that. And I also wanted to thank you for capturing all the comments. This report is very thorough and really gets at what we heard that night. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Roy DeClemente.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Given that this appeal has basically eaten up about 15 months worth of work, do we have a sense, and I'm not asking for an exact dollar amount, but do we have a sense of what the appeal may have cost us to this point?
That's a great question. Hi. Staff, anyone want to take a stab at that?
Mr. Chair, through you, we don't have a costing in terms of a tracking of out-of-pocket expenses. We don't envision those to have been significant. However, what I can tell you is there's been extensive amounts of staff resource time devoted to this initiative. That takes the form of preparing for meetings, extensive amounts of consultation, meetings with external organizations. There's been an extensive amount of resources expended on this initiative.
I don't think anyone would debate that point. I know from my own perspective, I've been critical of the Conservation Authority from this side of the table. I want to recognize that they do a lot of great work for us, and it's unfortunate, like all families, we have our moments of disagreement. Doesn't mean we think any less of them. But I will say, for the record, that I am troubled by the fact that we have two governmental organizations spending tax dollars fighting this, and we need to resolve this. So I fully support withdrawal of Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority withdrawing their appeal. Are there any questions or comments regarding this? Councillor Roy DeClemente.
Thank you. Just further to my inquiry about costs, I think it, although there's only one taxpayer, and the money that's being spent is taxpayer dollars being spent. However, it's coming from one bucket and going into another, and I might be inclined to, if this ends up at the LPAT, to be requesting costs, whether they're modest or not. I think it's symbolic. And it's frustrating because, as you said, this is a family, but at the same time, it's been a tremendous amount of spun wheels, if you will, and I don't like seeing tax dollars wasted.
I certainly agree with that. Although I think if we can get a withdrawal, we won't have to go that route. Mr. Webster, you have a comment?
A few comments. Just to further the treasurer's comments, there's been significant staff resources as well. We have had some external assistance. We've had some planning assistance initially before Mr. Bermuno came in as general manager, and also some external expert legal and planning advice throughout to really help us shape this, that we are in conformity. So that's one point. One thing we don't have in here is if this did have an LPAT hearing, when it would occur. And so Mr. Horner, who is absent with notice today, did contact the LPAT folks, and which is under review by the provincial government. That's one of the things that we have to bear in mind. But we were advised that the earliest possible date would probably be something in the April, May timeframe. So it drags it out even further, and that would add more costs. So really, the notion of seeking costs can still be dealt with. There's plenty of time to deal with that in the future. What I can tell you is there are some discussions imminent with the Conservation Authority to get our position across, to really try to get the appeal withdrawn. And as a matter of fact, it would be of assistance to us if this report, again, we didn't put it in here, but to have it ratified today by council so that staff can get walking and working to make sure that we can try to achieve council's direction, which has been pretty clear from the outset. I have to say it one more time, was to preserve the 1997 property zoning for our residents from an EP perspective. That's what we've done. And secondly is to get the LSRCA appeal withdrawn. So we're trying to task that. So I would ask the council consider moving that up, ratifying it at today's meeting of council.
Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you. I'm in favor of adding that to the motion, that it be ratified today. I think we have to, costs are important, and thinking of what this costs taxpayers is an excellent point. But in addition to that, we have to think of what this is costing our residents who are in limbo for so long. I heard at the open house about one resident who has had to move into a retirement home and needs the money from her house in order to pay for that, and has been unable to sell her house because this is all in limbo. So I think it's important that we let the Conservation Authority know what this is doing to real people in real time. This is not just about dragging it on forever and ever and who's right. It's about making sure that our residents can make use of their land and not have things in limbo. Thank you very much.
Councillor Morton.
I'm willing to add that to my motion, that we ratify it this evening at tonight's meeting.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, let's go ahead and call a vote. All those in favor? None opposed? Motion is carried. Back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We're at item L, that's Community Parks, Recreation, Culture. In the absence of Councillor Persicini, I will chair this portion. And the first item we have is Community Parks, Recreation, Culture Memo Operations Center update.
Through you, Madam Mayor, this is an update memo on the Operations Center project. Over the past 10 weeks, there have been significant background preparation work, construction activity, and momentum related to the project. The memo also provides construction milestones expected for the next quarter, including structural steel and masonry for the exterior facility walls, moving the project out of the ground. Updates will be provided quarterly, and CPRC is working closely with communications to update the public through our website as well as social media. And lastly, I'm pleased to report the project is tracking within schedule and within the approved budget. Be happy to answer any question.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Councillor Roy DeClemente.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Mr. Karmazin. Part of the goal in awarding our contract as quickly as we did was to make sure that we were going to be enclosed for winter so that we could be working on the interior. Are we still tracking on schedule for that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that is the intent. So we are tracking to have the building enclosed and to continue work over the winter months.
I just have a question. Are there any surprises so far, or are we're moving along as expected?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'm happy to say that we are moving as expected, and we have a good site, good soils, and we're now moving into a very exciting portion of the project, which is actually seeing the superstructure and actually getting out of the ground so we can start to see what the facility will start to look like with the exterior elevations.
Thank you very much. Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to staff. Have there been, we heard about how we're tracking to timelines. How are we tracking towards budgets on this? And have there been any changes along the way that we've had to make?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we are tracking within budget, within the assigned budget to end a project. I'm pleased to report that we have had very minimal changes. We've had 3 changes to date. 2 were to do with some structural changes that had to occur, and 1 minor change with regards to soils. But I am pleased to report that we are tracking well within the assigned budget to end a project.
Any other questions? Have a mover. Councillor Crone. All those in favor? And that's carried. Item number 2 is Community Parks, Recreation, Culture Report, Park Naming, Children of Peace Park. Mr. Karmazin.
Through you, Madam Mayor, this is a report updating council on the progress of the park to the south of the temple grounds. Throughout the design process for this park, we've engaged and consulted with the public and our stakeholders, in particular the Sharon Temple. The temple's assigned a working subcommittee to help inform the design. This report does request council endorsement of some recommendations for naming of the park and some prominent gardens within the park. The proposed names that are before council were provided by the STMS board and approved by the board. We do have a naming policy that does focus on the history of the site where a park is located. Given the significance of this park, we are requesting council endorse the naming, and as well to keep council aware of the potential naming for the park. Be happy to answer any question.
Thank you. Could I have a mover? Councillor Roy DeClemente. Question. I'm sorry, Councillor. Any questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just, up until now, we had been referring to it as Temple Park. Was there a problem with the prior name of Temple Park? I absolutely love the idea of the Democracy Garden, Hope Garden, but I wasn't sure that there was anything really wrong with Temple Park, and it's adjacent to the temple. Was there an issue with it?
Through you, Madam Mayor, not to my knowledge, there wasn't a specific issue that was brought forward to the town or staff's knowledge with the proposed naming of Temple Park. We did request a recommendation from the STMS board, given the site is adjacent to the temple grounds, and they have come back with the proposed naming of the park and 2 gardens that are within the park.
Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you. I do like the name Children of Peace Park versus Temple Park because it shows that it's separate from the temple. And I just want to also add that my experience on the school board is to name things early before a default name gets set in everyone's mind. With parks, we often refer, with schools, we would refer to them with the developer subdivision that they were in, and that name would stick with the community. So we ended up naming them much more in advance, and I would suggest that with future parks that we're looking at to pick a name early before a default name sticks. Thanks.
Any other questions? I just have a comment regarding the public art pieces. I'm really pleased to see that we're starting to put them into parks, and I hope that from this point on, we're able to see that on a regular basis. I know some parks lend themselves much more to art than others, but to have 2 in this one, I think is very appropriate and exciting that we're moving in that direction. Seeing no other questions, all those in favor? And that's carried. We're at item M, and that's other business. Any other business? Mr. Webster, do we have any other business?
Only a few advisements, Madam Mayor, for our interest in it, since it is being live streamed. Any chance we have to make a little promo? So next week is not an off week for council. It is, as a matter of fact, we have workshops planned for October 8th, 10 to 12, on our master plans and on our drinking water systems, with a presentation from the folks from Walkerton as well. So we're trying to encapsulate that into about a 2-hour workshop. That evening, I will remind everybody, and I think it's been very well advertised. I see a lot of billboards in the community, and we've been putting it in a paper and on social media. We do have our second open house for programs and services. We had one in the spring that was highly successful. So we're looking forward at having the opportunity to outreach to our residents and stakeholder groups, and just wanted to advise that we also have a large turnout. Our advisory committees all are wanting to present what they're doing, and so I think it's a real good showing. I think we have the police in attendance again, and a few of our other key community partners. So should be a good evening. So that's I believe starts at Ms. Hannah, 5 o'clock, and will run through to about 8 o'clock on October 8th.
Thank you. Anything else? Just before I close, I just really want to thank again our MPP, Caroline Mulroney, and the provincial government for the dollars. That's incredible amount to make a huge difference in our community, and we're very, very grateful and thankful for that. With that, could I have a motion to adjourn? Councillor Crone at 11:04. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much.